The Gospel of Luke tells us, with God nothing will be impossible. My dear people of God, today church is celebrating the solemnity of our Mother Mary's Assumption into heaven. This quite naturally will raise many questions in our minds regarding her assumption, such as, how can Mary, who a mere human, be taken up body and soul into heaven, and so on. But this is the matter of faith taught by the church. The Gospel of Luke tells us, with God nothing will be impossible. And Mary herself said, Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word. Our Blessed Mother's faith in God was based on her ardent love for God. That is why she surrenders herself totally to God at a very early age. As tradition teaches us, Mary in her early days itself decided to remain a virgin for God and live only for Him. We need to keep this in mind as we celebrate the solemnity of Mary's Assumption. Some further reflections will be placed on this feast. First, Mary's close association with Jesus and the unique appropriation of the work of Jesus culminated in her Assumption, when the ever-Virgin Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into the glory of heaven, says the dogma of this Assumption that was declared in 1950 by Pope Pius XII. Second, the scripture is silent about the end of Mary's life. Some Catholic scholars have seen the reference to the Assumption in today's first reading, Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and with the moon under her feet, and on her head the crown of 12 stars. It is possible that John is thinking here of Mary, the new Eve, and the mother of the Messiah. Third, there is in circulation in the early church popular accounts of the bodily Assumption of Mary. The church's growing conviction is based on the theological considerations rather than historical tradition. From the historical point of view, the most significant fact is that no local church has ever claimed to have the body of Mary. As Bishop Theotechnos, who died in the year 600 AD, said, the God-bearing body of Mary did not suffer corruption. It was preserved from corruption and was raised to heaven. He also points by way of analogy to Enoch and Elijah. Fourth, the theological reasons for Mary's Assumption can be stated in 3 points. First, if Eve had not sinned, she would not have experienced suffering or death or corruption. So Mary, the new Eve, because of her immaculate conception, was free from the bond of suffering, death, and of corruption. Second, there is a close link between Christ and Mary in salvation history. The scripture speaks of the child and his mother, and again, going into the house, the Magi saw the child with his mother Mary. The Christian insight is that this inseparable union continues even in heaven. Finally, we can mention another traditional reason favoring Assumption of Mary, namely, the conviction that it was not fitting that Jesus should permit the body from which his humanity had been formed, dough from which the bread of life was made, see corruption in the grave. Dear people of God, as we celebrate the solemnity of Assumption of Mary, let us remind ourselves of the St. Paul's who tells us in Ephesians, namely, that the power of grace of Christ can transfigure us far beyond anything we might ask of or even think of, so that we can be filled with the fullness of God. as Christ manifested His redeeming grace in the person of Mary to show all of us what the abundant riches of Christ can do in another human life, of one who is totally open to God like Mary.